Hello and welcome to Flight Club. My name is Klaus Leopold and I'm one of the hosts of this show here today. And with me is Cliff Hazell.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome back to Flight Club. Yes, so today we have a very exciting guest. We have Matthias, who is joining us, and we're going to be talking about some very interesting things. Before we get started, I've got a couple of things that I want to talk to you about. So firstly, if you like this channel and you like the video, please hit the like and subscribe button. And if you hit the bell, kind of a little bit down to your left-hand side, actually, if you hit this button, you will also get announcements and reminders when we are creating new events and videos and so on. So yeah, then I want to talk just briefly. We're going to tell you a little bit later. We have an exciting thing to announce. We're launching some new products. And I'll tell you a little bit more about this later on. And we're going to have a little bit of a special offer and some discounts for those who are on the live stream. You'll be able to take advantage of this. So stay tuned and you'll hear a bit more about this later on. So enough about all of my rambling. Let's meet Matthias. Do you want to tell us, Matthias, tell us a little bit about you and who you are?
Thank you. Thank you, Cliff. Thank you, Klaus, for inviting me from audience to participant in that live stream. And I'm very curious about our exchange today. Yeah, about myself, mainly briefly. My name is Matthias Lang. I'm based in my hometown, Austria, in Vienna. I'm a consultant. We support people and organizations in finding new ways of collaborating, of organizing, of leading. And I've another job, a very important job. I'm a father of two kids. The younger one just, had his first day in school the day before yesterday. Exciting week as well. I'm a husband. Those are my professions.
You sound like you're a busy person. Yeah. Cool.
But I'm enjoying this type of busy. I really enjoy.
Yeah, that's lovely. Cool. So you mentioned before that you're doing some interesting work. The company, I believe, is called Dwarfs and Giants.
Right.
I'm curious, what's the story behind this name? Tell us a little bit about where does this company come from? I find it interesting because it's dwarfs with a small d and giants with a capital G.
Yes.
Maybe on purpose, I guess. But
yeah.
What's behind this?
It's not from. We're not into role-playing games. That's not the background. Although it's a nice thing, but the background is it's a quote. There are some historic personalities which might have means that quote, but it's. Everything I contribute, I do while standing on the shoulders of giants. So we're in the matter of what is often called something like new work or whatever. And we want to explore new ways of working, of collaborating, as I said before. Also, our purpose is rewriting the future of organization. But we think that we only can be successful if we pay tribute to our predecessors of many, many smart men and women contributing to what we're doing right now. And that's why we called ourselves Dwarfs and Giants. And the logo of our company is the small d standing on the shoulder of the G. And when someone saw that logo when we drew it, they said, but that's a risky position. You might fall down any minute. And we said, yeah, that's it. It's risky task, risky endeavor, but we're on to it.
Cool. So now we know a little bit about you. I'm curious, usually on the live stream, we have folks from all over the world who are joining. Maybe just give us a shout in the channel and tell us, where are you joining from? It's always nice to see friendly faces from all over the place. Give us a shout. I myself, I'm based in Stockholm, Sweden. Matthias, as you said, you're in Vienna. Klaus, also in Vienna, in slightly different parts of Vienna, I'm assuming. Yeah. So yeah, nice to see some faces on the channel and people asking questions. as it says in the chat, as we go, please fire away your questions as we're talking. I'm pretty sure once we get going, you'll hear some bits and pieces that maybe you want us to go a little bit deeper on, or you have something that you want to kind of explore. Maybe how does this relate to that, this sort of a thing. So fire off the questions as we go, and we'll try to weave them into the conversation as much as possible. It makes it a little bit more interesting, I think, for everybody involved if we sort of evolve the content and, be agile, as it were. I think something like this, yeah?
Nice.
Cool. I'm seeing folks from all over. We've got Lisbon, Stuttgart, Mallorca, Munich, Switzerland, Italy, wow, Belgium, sure, everywhere. Sao Paulo,
UK,
Reading,
England.
Wow,
nice.
I have to tell you a story about, because I learned that Reading is how you say it in the UK, and the reason that I know this because it's written like reading, and the reason I found this out is because I have a voice assistant in my house and some automatic lights. And my wife talks to them when she wants to go to bed. She puts on the reading setting. But the easiest way to get it to understand her accent, because she's British, is to say reading instead of reading. And I thought this was super weird, but I love it. Every night you hear her reading and she goes to bed. So, awesome.
Nice.
Anyway, random story for all of you. Shall we get on with the show?
Yes.
Cool. So welcome to all of you joining us from all over the world. Toronto, what do we have? Germany, UK. Wow, nice, all over the place. And a couple of people even know Matthias, and I'm sure there are some faces. Yeah, indeed, New Zealand. Cool. Wow. Ah, cool. So we're here to talk about a topic, right?
Right.
This topic we described as establishing agile interactions across the company using tension as a guide. So maybe before we jump into too much detail about it, can you tell us, we talked a little bit when we were preparing the session about this concept of tension. How do you think about tension? What is it? Why is it important?
Tension is a specific, it's a word everybody uses, but has a specific meaning in role-based organizations. There are quite some concepts. The one we're using right from the beginning of when we founded Dwarfs and Giants 5 years ago in a holacracy setup. Tension is defining the gap between the constant situation and the current reality and the sense potential. So the larger the gap gets, the stronger the tension is. And tension is the driver for development. Whenever I experience such a tension, I sense it, I become aware of it, it points me to a potential. And this is the one element of how we navigate in our self-organized setup. So it means becoming aware of this tension, sensing those tensions, and then addressing them. Voicing them, working with them, and that is the main work we do. We just look for tensions and exploit them. The other element which is helping us to navigate is the purpose of the organization, and also the purpose then of the roles. Very easy a translation of a purpose would be something like a North Star.
Okay. I like this, the way that you're talking about this, because when we were chatting before, I was sort of reflecting on my experience working with different companies. And one of the things that I found interesting is that very often, I think we kind of run into a situation where we assume that a lot of things are really, really clear because something sort of comes by default. I am a coach or a product manager or a tech lead or whatever. And the assumption is that somehow everybody knows what that means. But if you've worked at more than one company, or even if you've never worked at a company before, probably you have some slightly different ideas in my experience. And so I like this because I think what it starts to do is it helps to give us some tools and some ways to try to, say, oh, well, we're running into some kind of, I used the word friction, but you said tension, this sort of thing of like, okay, something is happening here. It's causing some sort of discomfort. And so we want to try to explore this a little bit and say, yeah, we could make things a little bit clearer, or kind of check, is our understanding the same? How does that resonate with your thinking? Maybe there's more to the concept as well.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with your perception, and I think that tension and friction, all fine, whichever term you prefer. I think that in order to deal with tensions, you have to adopt a different mindset, because the way we see a lot of conventional organizations deal with such friction or tension is to look away, to shy away from that. Like it works very well if there is no tension. So tension is a deficit, a problem, and not the fuel for driving the organization. So you have to develop a different mindset. And in the end, maybe we'll chat a little bit later about that, you need to develop competencies for addressing conflicts and resolving conflicts. That is one of our learnings from the last 5 years. Since it's an ongoing activity, you never can resolve tensions once and for all. They are here all the time. You need to be, as an organization, as a social system, as an individual, you need to be able to deal with it. And being addressed by someone else, mentioning a tension which is in place and somehow involves you, and not to understand that as an attack, but as a chance to grow.
Yeah. So for me, what's interesting about this is that in when we talk about flight levels and when we're facilitating sort of the development of interactions across multiple teams or different parts of the organization, usually what happens is that we run into some of these differences of variation of like, I think this or I think that, or maybe my assumption is this, not necessarily that one is right or wrong. But usually what we find is that there's quite a lot of advantage and opportunity to taking things that are maybe different perspectives and being able to align or connect them some way to be able to say, okay, well, the metaphor that I've used before is if I hold up my phone and I say, well, you can see this side of my phone, but I can see the other side. Neither of us is right or wrong. It's just that we're seeing different aspects of the same sort of context. Yes. And so some way to try to blend these together, I think it's not just about the interactions. It's about, we just see more of the real. And I think that's really, really cool. I'm curious. So, sorry, I think you were going to say something.
Yeah, Cliff, I just wanted to build on what you did right now, because there was an excellent example of what you did was you did a visualization.
Yeah.
You made something visible and you allowed us to take a look at the same thing, maybe from different perspectives, but without showing your phone, it would be at least more challenging, maybe sometimes even not possible, to look at the same thing at the same time. And there is the one parallel between the Kanban and flight level approach and the holacracy or a role-based approach. It's about making things transparent, making things visible. On one hand side, it's make work visible, and holacracy is very specific in making expectations visible. What can I expect from you in your role? What can you expect from me in my roles? And those are so close to each other. And on the other hand side, complementary. And that is why it was very inspiring to combine those two worlds for us.
If I can kick in here. So you mentioned holacracy. So I'm not sure if we all have the same understanding about what holacracy actually is. So can you just somehow briefly introduce it?
One of our slide I once used in an introduction was Gandalf and a meme with Gandalf, and below there was standing holacracy. What kind of sorcery is this? Because there are many rumors or whatever about holacracy. I would not say it's the purpose of our today's session to have a holacracy intro, but maybe I have one slide I can share just to highlight one aspect which is of relevance to our discussion about the flight levels afterwards as well.
Exactly, that would be cool, okay. I think.
Let me just switch here and
magic happens.
It's I believe it's called the Zoom what is it? The Zoom handshake or something like this. It's how you start every call. Can you see me? Can you hear me? Can you see my slides? No, I can't. Oh, wait, we're waiting for someone on the call. It's like everybody knows this dance
enter
now.
the pin. Enter the pin.
Real life now.
Oh, there we go.
I hope you see my screen now.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
We do.
Just one aspect, because that is important for the story of introducing flight levels at our organization. In Holacracy, people are filling roles, and as is indicated by those arrows here, more than one. I do not have one job, one position, but I energize many roles, 2, 10, whatever, and might also switch. And the interesting thing is that these roles have authority, in some cases ultimate authority. So my role has authority, I take decisions, and these decisions, they are binding for other roles and people filling those roles. Interestingly, another person has another role, and this role also has the authority to take decisions, which I then have to follow. So it's reciprocal. And in contrast to hierarchical setups, where people are superior or subordinate to other people, here we have a hierarchy of work or a hierarchy of roles. So in one setting, I have to follow the lead of one role, and in another question or dimension, that same person follows my lead in my role. And that is a tremendous difference in how power is perceived and played out in the organization. And another aspect of that is, and that is the reason why Holacracy, or one of the reasons why Holacracy was developed by many people working in that in many generations, so to say, or versions of the setup. That you want, as in many organizations, you want to become more agile, more responsive. You want to foster initiative. You want to foster speed in how to react to circumstances in the market. And that is leading to various people in various roles taking decisions.
Yeah.
And interestingly, also after some time, when we grew up to, we are a small niche consultancy firm with 20 people, but even at that size, we learned that it became more and more challenging to align, to jointly prioritize, and there are so many interdependencies. Key players are asked to join projects and become bottlenecks. We had no tool in place to coordinate and align organization-wide. Yeah, you've seen before the circles. It's easy in Holacracy to align within a circle, but it became very challenging for us to get a common picture of where we invest, where we focus on, and that triggered a search within us. And after checking some opportunities, some options, we stumbled upon flight levels, and that opened up a new chapter in our story.
Something else that I thought was interesting with this is this kind of idea of providing some tools and languages, or language at least, to be able to talk about these kind of concepts. Because I think what happens often is that I've found this in multiple different scenarios in different organizations, is that usually something kind of gets raised only if there's a problem. And so what that means is that it creates quite a lot of friction for me, because especially if I'm a new person coming in, I want to say, hey, this meeting sounds a bit weird, or I'm not really sure about that thing. It's somehow me sort of almost making trouble in a way, or being sort of going against the grain. And what I like about this is that it's sort of acknowledging that we have to deal with these kinds of things because they're going to exist. But just like having, say, a retrospective on a regular basis creates a space for you to be able to say, okay, actually, if I want to talk about the challenge, that's the place I can do it. It's not like, oh, I have to feel like, shit, everything is broken and I have to really plan, like, get everybody together so that we can talk about the problem. It's like there is already kind of a safe and inviting space where you can go to talk about this thing. And this is kind of doing that for all of the other interactions, I think, if you're doing it well. I'm curious if you think about some of the experiences that you've had with different organizations. Maybe you can tell us a story of somewhere where this has kind of gotten a little bit easier, or some sort of smoother, simpler, better, faster, something like this interactions as a result of the work that you've done.
Yeah, I think you opened up so many doors right now within the last 1.5 minutes. Because you
let's see where it goes.
No, but because I think you touched one of the core issues here. One thing is what we see, and we've been working on that topic the whole day and also yesterday, a small group here at Dwarfs and Giants, that what we see is that, as I said before, the normal mode is to look away, to not address tensions, or put them under the carpet. And by doing so, they're out of sight, but they keep growing. And everybody knows they're there, like the elephant in the room. And what we experienced many times is that this tension, which is not actively addressed, is getting more and more frightening. So people have huge respect, anxiety, even have expressed fear when we invite them to directly address it. And there is, in the long run, no way to address it indirectly. You have to take it. You have to look at it. You have to tackle it. And there are so many anxieties. What might happen, like catastrophic scenarios. They will kick me out. He will never forgive me, or
would be the troublemaker, something like this.
Or I might destroy him by voicing that, or whatever. There are both directions possible. Who is threatening whom? So that it keeps them. It keeps them even more. It pushes them away from addressing that. And so the original problem is then covered by a layer of anxiety, and makes it even less likely to start it. And then after some time, prepare it, and people, make that step over that threshold. They are so surprised how easy it was, and so relieved then that they have not, been injured or injured someone else. That they wonder afterwards, why didn't we take that step for the last months or whatever? Yeah, so they cannot believe it afterwards. But that needs to, you need to create psychological safety here, and you need to create to provide steps, methodologies, setups in order to have a sort of a safety here baked into the process of clarifying those tensions. Yeah, the process provides stability and safety and security in order to tackle those relational issues.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting, because there's this sort of thing of, if you want to try to build psychological safety in an environment, and I've talked about this a couple of times at different conferences, but it's hard in the sense that it's difficult because it's usually an uncomfortable setting. But the challenge, I think, is that a lot of people don't really lean into having those kinds of conversations. And so there is a little bit of, almost, from my experience at least, like kind of learning by doing. When you stand up in front of a group of folks and you talk about, hey, this is my concern, or this is the thing that is like a point of tension, how are we going to deal with this? Like you bring something that was previously sort of, I think maybe by human nature, we sort of like to hide those things, as you were saying. But like, if we bring it out into the air and we start saying, hey, we actually need to find ways to agree or to deal with this kind of tension. How are we going to deal with this? It's not enough for me to just complain during my smoke break to my buddies or to my wife when I get home in the evening. Like, we need to tackle this stuff. And so, I think this is really cool, because it's sort of a practical way to start addressing some of the safety, to be able to talk about stuff. Firstly, by making it explicit, but also giving people the tools to then kind of question and develop new ones and adapt them as they need to change, that kind of thing.
Yes.
Yeah.
And some retrospectives we know from the Agile sphere are, where you can first just address work topics, collaboration topics. That's helpful to start to create that sphere. And also those, standing in front of the flight level board triggers such conversations, because you cannot avoid it. Yeah, it's there. It's right in front of you. And that's not always a pleasure to be nudged, to being confronted with those triggers, but it creates the opportunities to start those conversations. If I don't have that transparency, if we don't establish that visualization, then it's easier not to experience those trigger moments.
Yeah. If it's not normal to talk about, what does this even mean?
Yes.
And how are we going to deal with it? It's very difficult. Yeah.
And in our case, when we're standing in front of a flight level 3 board, our company board, as we call it, we want to be transparent on that. We had some quite challenging conversations when it was clear it's just too much. Yeah, that's why we called it our experience death by too many great ideas. We were in danger of suffocating all those wonderful projects, and there were some really critical decisions, and I had a lot of respect of how some of the partners dealt with it. Watching them carrying their favorite project to the grave, in order to serve the organization's purpose. And I was tight in that situation. I felt tight because I did not know how that might unfold, to be honest. And but everybody saw it's necessary. It's like you see it on the board. It's here for the first time, and everybody knew that's too much. Yeah, we cannot deal with that. We have to do something. Yeah, and then a good dialogue started on where do we see priorities and why do we see those priorities? And of course, some priorities changed over the course of the dialogue, but it was necessary to have it there in front of you.
I like that. I think it's interesting because it's, as you're saying, it's kind of about so many more things. It's not just about interpersonal relationships. And I think often maybe people get sort of a weird idea when we talk about some of these things, because they sort of think, oh, well, it's just about, soft skills. I hate that term, but just this idea of, trying to do these things that are sort of, it's almost like they're a nice to have, or they're sort of not really that important on the side. Yes. But the reality is that if you have a board of directors or an executive team who can't actually make decisions about strategy and agree to not this kind of disagree and commit kind of thing, but actually like go through the conflict and figure out what do we actually need to do about this thing, you're going to end up with all kinds of, one part of the company's going in this direction, one part of the company's going in another direction, because we just don't have any focus. And so, that's, I get excited about this, and I warned you, I said I was going to talk sort of a little bit louder as we go or something. But it's these kind of things, because I think these sort of things are so often overlooked. We focus so much on the methods and the tools and like, is it visible? Do we have WIP limits? All of this kind of stuff. And those are important. But if we can't then have healthy conversations about what we're seeing on our boards and what we're noticing as a result of that visibility, well, the problem's there, but you just can't do anything about it. Like that's really not super helpful.
Yeah. For me, I know some of the background of flow and what it means if there's a lot of work in process and stuff like this, and I can somehow understand it and everything is great. But it's a huge change in behavior. So I can imagine that you, in your company, Matthias, it's not so much of a problem. Although I think even here it's quite challenging. But what do you do? How do you make it happen somehow out there? Because it's really there is so many things that we always think, okay, we need to start this project in order that we finish the project. But the point is, starting doesn't finish work. You need to finish work if you want to finish work, right? So it's often easy like this. But this is. Yeah, we can talk about this. This sounds funny and everything's great and stuff like this. But how do you convince people to do this?
One situation pops up when listening to your question, Klaus, because sometimes the problem about finishing starts with the moment where things are starting. just allow me to unfold to share with you one moment from one of our projects. A project team meets not for the first time and has a sort of a workshop with planning session and reflection and whatever, and the managing director of that company joins the session, and to have a dialogue, to get updates, information exchange, how do you perceive the project and so on, but also to provide clarity on the expectations regarding the next step. And he was really very, open and shared what is important to him. And there have been some questions, and then he left after, I think, in total 1 hour, maybe a little bit more. It took us, I think, 4 or so hours afterwards to figure out what he meant. And to make it short, we were not successful. And it turned out, I, as an external consultant, I was not so much, in the content of the decision. I was of no help here. But that the specialists, the experts, had so many questions, and his statements triggered interdependencies for the next task, which they just did not voice because they were afraid that they would, appear as doubtful, hesitant, critical, skeptical. And also they had some remarks like, how you sketch it out, there are some problems in there. We would need to tackle them. But again, problems seemed problematic, to voice those problems. So that showed us we had to work on the communication and on the expectations here. And it took us months to change that communication style, to really have a dialogue on the briefing. And within that dialogue, and we built here on some tools we know from the Holacracy world, where we have a structured dialogue with questions, reactions, and objections in that sequence, objections which need to be integrated afterwards. And it's the team, together with the managing director, they arrived at a new normal style, a new normal, how to relate to each other. And it also showed that the managing director, he was just bluntly not aware of the question marks which he left behind. He left the meeting like, okay, it's clear, no further question, cool, they're on it, see you in 3 months or whatever. And he was very grateful that he was confronted with those questions, because that triggered new thoughts and he learned a lot about the problem. So we're shying away from being honest with each other, and we're shying away of making expectations clear. But you're only successful if you do it in a mutual way. It does not work, in one direction only.
Yeah, that makes sense.
I like the way you're talking about this thing of sorry, you were just saying now, what was it, questions? I've gone blank on the word, sorry. It was questions and
questions, reactions, objections.
Yes, sorry, it was in my head, and then for some reason it just popped out. Questions, reactions, and
you can wake me up anytime.
Could you give us maybe a sort of more specific example of something like, so maybe I stand up and I make an announcement of some kind, and then how would this work?
That is what I quoted here is that is work by Holacracy 1. That is also building on the roots of sociocracy. Those two approaches are very familiar. And the process is, as you said, I have a proposal. And that, if you want to have an example, that can be a proposal for a strategy. It could be a proposal of a role description. I want you in your role to be accountable for whatever. It's also close to a sort of an advice-based decision making. And I the steps are: I voice the tension where I see a potential to build on. Then I have a proposal, and then I stop. Others have questions for understanding, and that is a wonderful process, and people are quite swift in picking up on that. Questions for understanding is no discussion, no conveying opinions. Question of understanding is what question do I need to ask in order to better understand your proposal only. And after that, we make a reaction round. Everybody in the room can voice his or her reactions. And everybody from like, I love the idea, finally, to that's the worst idea I ever heard, to I have a remark, I think we could even integrate that. Yeah. But it's just reaction. And then the person bringing the proposal has the opportunity to also share which of the reactions he might want or she integrate into the original proposal. And then we make a safety check. And I love that safety check idea. The metaphor is, okay, we are developing our boat. We're drilling a hole just to make sure it's above the waterline and not below. The question is it safe enough to try? And that is it safe enough to try? That's so mind shifting, because it changes the mindset from no, we cannot do that here. If there would be a better way, we would have adapted it a long time ago, to when in doubt, be for the change. In dubio pro change. That's a quote here. Yeah. And that is so relieving.
Yeah. I really like that. And something that I picked up from an unrelated concept, but that I think would apply to this, is that you can also use it in a coaching stance or in reverse. So as an example, if you're explaining something to me, I could ask, or at least I'm explaining something to you, I can actually say, what are your questions? And then, clarify it and make it clear. And then, okay, what reactions do you have? And make sure to make some time and space for that. And then, okay, what objections do you have? And you don't necessarily have to teach everybody sort of formally, I think. I mean, just as a starting point, you can use it as that. So either in the sense of like, I have some questions, I have some reactions, I have some objections, or you could do it, as I said, as the sort of the person presenting something.
Yes, and the management team you've been talking about before, people in management teams, they're alpha animals all over the place, men and women. They're so relieved by the structure. Yeah. We stopped fighting. Yeah. It's so good to follow the structure. Still, I can express my opinion. Yeah. And by the way, we follow that logic even in front of our flight level board. If you have a new project, a new task, whatever, you have to write it down, make the proposal for the new project explicit, then we ask questions, then we hear reactions, and then we process it using the safety check as well. Yeah. And so it's very easy to combine it and use it on different levels, on work, content, strategic decisions, or content discussions.
Yeah,
that's cool.
I like that. Klaus, you had a question from live.
Exactly. Oh, wow. That looks different today. I don't know. I will fix this sooner or later. The question is from 44 Sunbeam. What are the top 3 tensions you see in organizations? Distribution of resources, promotions, what are they? Question to you, Matthias.
Yeah. Wow. That's a tiny question.
Yes.
One of the questions I personally hold is, which is of importance to me, to start with a personal question, then maybe shift to a more general observation level, is how can we support people in not holding back? How can we shift structures, processes, and culture of organizations so that people bring in their observations, their doubts, their expertise? That is something that is not new. That is not an agile thing here. That is what Karl Weick talked about in the 60s and 70s of last century. Is that push down the authority to make decisions down in the organization, in his hierarchical setup, as he looked at organizations back then. And we train people to shut up, and that is really we miss so much of expertise and observations and knowledge and power. And when shifting to self-organization or a role-based setups, we really have to support people to rediscover those competences. And I like one of my favorite quotes is that organizations are not starving; they're they're overfeeding. They just they die from too much work, from too much ideas, from too many projects. Yeah, I remember a sales organization with also 17 strategic initiatives, 14 of them priority 1, and 3 of them a golden one. Yeah, so it's like putting too many wet clothes on a line, so they won't be able to dry. And as I said before, sometimes it's easy just to take turns, to slow down in order to speed up. And slowing down is really painful for a lot of people in organizations, but it's necessary to really listen to each other and pay attention to each other.
Yeah. I think it's interesting because there's another aspect that's coming to mind with this, is that I've seen it quite often with teams that are struggling with something, and it's not so much that you're doing the wrong thing, but more so much doing it at the wrong time. So as an example, if you're having a conversation early on and you start raising objections right at the beginning, for some people that's kind of a natural stance, but for others, I would rather make sure that we actually all agree and understand. So that structure of questions first, then reactions, then objections, I think is a good thing. My wife has taught me over the last few years to tell her 3 things that I like about her idea before I tell her all the things I don't. And it's been really helpful to me, not only in the context of our relationship, but just generally in life. Even if you have to try really, really hard and you think something is really not good, just try to find one thing. Like, I appreciate the effort that you've put into this, for example. I can see you've worked really hard on this, and acknowledge that before you come in with a ton of bricks and drop, that's a problem. And I think very often what this helps to do is that you can sort of almost facilitate it in a way of saying, like, that's an interesting reaction, but we're talking about questions now. Let's come back to that when we're talking about reactions. And so you're giving, like, some people are going to have a different response or a different sort of, maybe some people have lots of questions, others are going to build on it, some people are going to tell you what's wrong with it. They're all valuable, but we want them in a different kind of order. And as long as we're making space for each of them, people can kind of, I think you talked about the example of executives kind of having conflict. Like, I'm really concerned that we're going to make a bad decision here. And so I want to make sure that that is considered and discussed. And so if I know that there's time in 10 minutes time to deal with this, this can help a lot.
Yeah.
So yeah. I want to expand just a little bit before we take the next question. You talked about this idea of trying to get people to sort of unshut them up. I think was sort of how you said it. And Pavel was saying on the channel here, just that it's easier said than done. I'm wondering if you can tell us a little bit of some of the things. I know this is a deep and a hard topic, but maybe just 1 or 2 simple things that people could try if they want to sort of maybe take the first steps in this sort of a space.
There are some small steps you can take. And for example, a carefully conducted retrospective is a very easy and in the same time powerful way to start new sorts of dialogues. And integrating, if you have a hierarchy in place, also stakeholders, to also train them, to develop them like bottom up. And also to to create space for relational issues as well. We are human beings. Yeah, it's not only about content and role work and projects.
Yeah,
but I think that is that doesn't do the whole trick. And we, for example, one thing we are struggling with and taking the next step is soon now is the question, for example, of profit distribution and ownership. It's about money. If you have that inequality in place, like some of us are owning a company and receiving dividends, and the others are working to make others rich, you don't have full entrepreneurship. It's an as-if thing, and I think you really have to tackle those things. For example, we're now going to build a foundation and building a solution where the company owns itself, so nobody else is the owner. And currently we have in place that owning the company makes no difference for our decision making. Holding shares of our company makes no difference at all whether someone has the right to influence a decision or not. And you have to be very strict on that, otherwise it sneaks back in. I know these are fundamental shifts, but if you do not address them, this inequality, and there's parts of it are harmful by definition. Yeah, it's not about whether you're a nice guy or not. It's there, and you cannot talk it away, or just being kind and generous. You just the generous father or mother, and it's not a conversation on eye level. So you have to think about ownership and structure of ownership and profit distribution.
I like that. I think what I'm hearing in this is that you didn't kind of start with the really, really tough topics on day one. Is that you start maybe with something a little bit simpler, you learn some of the tools and techniques, and now after a few years of being in business, you're talking now about ownership and how do we make these sort of more broad decisions and so on. And I think that that's something that I've seen a lot of folks do, is that it's not only in a flight levels class or in a holacracy or sociocracy context. So many times you read a book, you go on a course, you learn something new, and then you go and apply it to somewhere where it's really quite hard to be successful the first time around, even when you really, really do know what you're doing. And so maybe one thing to add to that is just to say to folks trying out something that can be helpful, and I think you use this in your context as well, is do something like a role play or try it out in a context where it actually doesn't necessarily have high stakes. Yes. Test it out in a simple setting, learn to just kind of be comfortable with the natural techniques, and get to a point where you're kind of comfortable with it before you go on and try to do it maybe in a large sort of big group setting, because the cost of failure and the consequences of that are often quite high. And I think that that's sort of, I don't know, maybe just generally good life advice, not exclusively to this context, but try something small. Don't charge in too aggressively. Yes. One other thing I wanted to just pick up on was this idea, because this is such an interesting topic for me. I've spent a lot of time working in this sort of space, working with leadership teams to try to help them have good conversations here. Is that very often what I think we do as leaders in an organization is sort of blame the individuals. And so if people are sort of silent when you're asking for feedback or input, usually in my experience, that's because they've learned to be that way. And probably because some of us even taught them to be that way, as opposed to, them just kind of being bad people or something. And so if you can try to find spaces where folks can feel like they can step forward and start to share some of their thoughts without having to sort of stand up on stage, maybe with a microphone, because I think, as most of us know, public speaking is probably the most feared thing for most people. I'm the exception to that, perhaps, or one of the exceptions to that. But a lot of people, if you ask them to get up on stage and make a speech, they cannot imagine anything worse. And so now they have to talk about something that they're uncomfortable with in a public setting in front of people that already don't trust. That's going to be quite difficult and challenging. So, yeah. Yeah. I actually want to turn the conversation a little bit. Sorry, there was a question here. Klaus, I think you've got it ready.
Yes.
Bernd was asking, basically, do you have in a critical or sort of unusual situation, do you tend to bring in a facilitator, or is it something that you kind of maybe run from within the group, or how do you handle these kind of situations?
one of the quotes I really am grateful for is from Brian Robertson. He said, acting yourself into a new way of thinking is easier than think yourself into a new way of acting.
Yes.
And so it starts with behavior. And at the same time, our traditions, our culture, it's very strong, and it sucks you back in the used patterns. So if you want to establish new forms of communication on relating to each other or making decisions, whatever, it's quite challenging to do that from within the team. So if you really want to change gears here, it's helpful for a limited time frame to rely on the expertise and the knowledge rooted in experience by a facilitator. And that facilitator holds you in the process, whatever that is. Might it be dealing with conflicts or decision making, whatever. And but it is the responsibility of that external facilitator to quickly, as we know it from the Scrum world, to quickly train in-house facilitators from the organization, from the team, to take on that job. Otherwise, it's the magic of the external, and people do not trust in their own skills. But yes, in the beginning, if you really want to initiate a cultural shift, external facilitators are very helpful.
Yeah, makes sense.
Cool.
Shall we take another question,
Klaus.
Cliff, or do you want to comment on this one?
I was going to jump to the next question. Do you want to go for it?
Yeah, I can, if you like. So there's another question from Sylvia, and Sylvia is like, okay, how would you start in an organization where people actually don't give honest bad news, for instance, for project delivery? And if you do it, you basically lose your job. What would you do in a situation like this? Is the question of Sylvia.
First of all, I would be really interested in, as I said before, when I talked about conflicts, is that an anxiety, or is it like, and I would have a total empathy for that. Like I'm afraid they kick me out. Yeah, might be a risk here. But I would also ask, are there concrete experiences with that? Has that happened? Yeah, or is it an anxiety? And both are realities, but of different kind, so to say. And I would then see it as a necessity to work with the power holders in that organization, usually managers or whatever, and somehow create an upward feedback loop in a hierarchy, if that's so, to make them aware, and make them aware of the costs and consequences, and work with them on the question, how can we overcome that paradigm? How can we overcome that anxiety? How can we get rid of that threat? Because it's so costly. And to be frank, sometimes the system is ready to do that, to go that path, follow that path, and sometimes individuals or management teams or whatever are not willing to change, because they have a different perspective on how human beings are and work and are configured, and so it depends. At least in hierarchies, it depends on a small number of individuals whether they are willing to go follow that path. Just briefly building on what you said before, Cliff, when you said that lab or that training space, it reminded me on a concept by Edgar Schein. He said, let's build cultural islands. And as I said before in the example with the project team and the managing director, the project team established a new form of relating to each other and invited the hierarchy representative to join that discussion and experience a different form. And I think it's necessary not to hear about it or read about it, but to make a first-hand experience. And that's what we need cultural islands for. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that's such a tricky one because I've seen this from all sides. I've been the person who's had to deal with folks who are raising the concerns. I've been the person who has been booted from a company for raising too many concerns. All the different variations of this, and I think there's so much different nuance inside that. But it's definitely one of those things like. A previous colleague of mine used to say that you can change your company or you can change your company, and basically what that means is either make it better or go somewhere else, which is maybe a slightly flippant example, but I think in this case it's really like if the prevailing stance is that people who raise concerns get fired, that to me sounds quite unhealthy and quite toxic. And if you're not able to find some way through that and be able to find at least some leaders who understand the consequences of those decisions and those actions, I mean, you're just going to get no information. If you're firing people who raise problems, magically you're not going to hear about any problems. And I really don't think that that's necessarily the intent. So to sort of not say you have to run away, but at least consider that it's really important that these consequences get dealt with and at a systemic level. Yeah.
But I pay you to solve the problems and not to talk about them.
Sure. I mean, I've heard this before. And that's the challenge, though, is that sometimes we need some assistance in figuring out how to solve it or what the constraints or boundaries are. To fix this, I need some money, and you control the money. And so how do we figure that out?
I've even seen this one where money is not an issue. It's like, I mean, usually it's not lack of money in organizations. So it's like you can have all the money you want, more or less unlimited resources, but still, a woman takes 9 months to get a baby.
Yeah.
No matter how much money you throw it on it.
Yeah. But what I like this idea of first trying. Sorry, Matthias, just to try to test is this actually what's going on? Because I've had it before where you're in the situation where it's like, somebody got fired because they raised a problem, but there's actually a lot more to the story. And so when you unpack it and look a bit deeper, sometimes it can be that different folks are concerned about different things. And if you can really surface, to bring it back to what we were talking about at the beginning, like what is that actual tension and how can we start to resolve it?
Yeah.
Cool. So we're actually quite short on time, and I want to make sure that we ask you one more question before we go. But I just want to quickly make a little bit of an announcement about two things. So firstly, just a reminder, if you're enjoying this, please remember to hit the subscribe button. We're trying to build up our subscribers. There's a bunch of cool community features that we unlock when we get to 1,000 subscribers, and we're on just shy of 600 at the moment. So, we need a few more. And of course, if you like it, hit a like, hit a comment in the box. Tell us what you like about these and so on. That would be super helpful for us. We're trying to make these as useful and helpful as possible. Secondly, I want to tell you that Klaus and myself have been working on something called a Introduction to Flight Levels. In short, it's basically an online course that tells you a little bit about the fundamentals of flight levels and how to get started. And now we want to try to make this as accessible to as many people as possible. And so one of the things that we're going to be doing is announcing today, you're the first people to hear about this in public, that the course is actually going to be available in the next couple of weeks. And we're actually opening pre-registrations with a little bit of a discount for people who will be who are on the Flight Club. I will share a link shortly, but I want to just screen share so that I can show you very quickly a little bit of what it looks like over here. So you should be able to see my screen more or less now. Basically, it looks kind of like this. We're using an online tool. It works very similar to Coursera or Udemy if you've used these before. It's called Thinkific. Maybe some of you have used this before. And basically, the course is for folks who want to learn sort of the fundamentals, but maybe you're not yet sure what path you need to go in or what type of help you might need using flight levels. You want to understand how it can be used in your organization. We got a whole bunch of information about the course curriculum over here. You can see all of the content, and there's a little bit of an introduction video. If you're not tired of seeing our wonderful faces, we will explain a little bit of the course and so on, what's in there. Yeah, and of course, you can find out some more information about the Academy. I'm going to stick a link in the chat now, and you can also have a look. There's a discount code that will give you 20% off the course. The one thing I want to emphasize is that the course is really only a piece of what we're trying to offer, is because Klaus likes to joke and say that, it's not just about going on one date. We don't want you just to come and take a course with us and it's one thing. What we actually want is sort of more of a serious longer term relationship. And so what we think needs to happen is that in order for that to work out, we need to support you on your journey, not just on one day, but over maybe some several months or years even, as you evolve and learn about these things. And so what's included in this workshop, or the course at least, is also access to our community. And obviously you can continue to attend these events, but there's also community posts. We have lean coffee sessions. We have check-ins where you can come and talk to us and ask your questions, all of this kind of stuff, a broad community of multiple guides and other folks who are doing this stuff. So I will paste the link in shortly and you can see the discount code as well. But if you're interested, sign up now. The course will be available in the next couple of weeks and you can check it out. I think it's great and hopefully you enjoy it as well. Cool. So enough about my sales pitch. I guess I can stop screen sharing here. Last question I want to ask to Matthias. I just wanted to ask, so tips for people starting out in this, right? You've seen a lot of different things. What would be something that you would say is a very important thing to either to keep in mind or to make sure that you don't do this or absolutely do this as a tip for people starting out with these kind of topics?
I like the principle from Kanban, start with what you do now. And there is value in that. For example, description of roles. When you start to have a role-based organization, start with just writing down what you do today. And although there are many then post-its on the wall and you might cluster them into roles, what I find so interesting is that the appreciation for the people working in that organization is so important. Like for the first time since I've started working in the organization, my work now is visible. I mean, it's different for carpenters or whatever. You see the workpiece, but in people working in expert organization, knowledge organization, now everybody here in the team or the organization sees what I'm doing, yeah, and that is so appreciative. And from there, you can then build on that because now you have transparency, you can relate to it, and if something changes, you adapt to that, and you immediately have an adaptive organization. And same with work content on the board, whatever. Yeah, visualization is so empowering and so helpful and so easy to do. Yeah, and the second thing is invest in learning, invest in retrospectives, invest in reflections, invest in breaks which help you to speed up. And the last thing I want to repeat because it's so important. Invest in conflict resolution skills. There is so much potential in there, and it's also apart from being in the position to collaborate better. It's also an investment in personal growth, like you before said, Cliff. A remark from your wife about how to enter your dialogues within your marriage. That is something you can easily convey to your work life and vice versa. Yeah. So
very valuable. Yeah.
I'm afraid it's not possible to stop learning.
Hopefully not. Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, thank you, Matthias, so much for joining us. It's been wonderful to have you. I've really enjoyed talking about this topic with you. I'm sure we're going to keep in contact and talk about more things. And I hope that we get to meet each other in person because we haven't, unfortunately, been able to do that as yet. And just to everybody on the stream, I want to say thank you so much for joining us. Check out the link that I've said in the chat for the course. Of course, hit the subscribe button, like button. The recordings will be available. pretty much immediately you can watch it. And if you would like to talk with any of us more, I will add links to our Twitter accounts. You can get that in the descriptions as well, and come and chat to us some more. Yeah. Anything from you, Klaus?
Thank you very much for joining us, Matthias. And I just noticed the funny thing is you are from Vienna and you're living in Vienna and I'm living in Vienna, but we never met in Vienna, did we?
No.
We met in...
we go to Hamburg and Zurich.
Zurich and stuff, yeah. Which is, yeah, okay. But we can change this, right? So we have the power to change this.
And thank you for having me. It was an honor and a pleasure. Thank you very much. I enjoyed it.
Thank you so much. Cool. Cheers, everyone. Thanks for coming.
That's it. Cheers. Goodbye.